Hello, eighth graders. Today we are going to be talking about literary devices. Literary devices are sort of strategies that authors use to emphasize a certain point or make something sound better within a text. We're going to be talking about them specifically in relation to poetry, since that is the unit that is coming up. After this presentation, there is a short 5-question quiz that I would like you to take. You can use your notes, so feel free to take notes while you watch this video. So the first one we have is symbolism. Symbolism is a device in which one thing, it could be like a person, location, a thing, and it's used to represent the meaning of another thing or concept. So love being represented as a rose. Love is not literally a rose, but an author can use a rose to sort of define love. So sort of the idea that it's beautiful, but also has those thorns. It's a pretty popular symbol, but essentially rose is being used to like give meaning to love. A specific example of symbolism is a simile. A simile is a comparison of two unlike things using like or as. He is as brave as a lion. She dances like a gazelle. The man is not a lion. The woman is not a gazelle. But in using the lion and the gazelle, the reader can kind of learn about how the man is, how the woman is. And these are similes and not metaphors, because it says as and like. In contrast, a metaphor is a comparison of two unlike things that doesn't use like or as. Life is a play, for example. And using play to define life, that gives a specific meaning to life, perhaps that people are performing throughout their life, but it doesn't say like or as. In addition, there's a lot of very common phrases that we use that are metaphors. For example, it's raining cats and dogs. That's an everyday phrase that people use, but it's never literally raining cats and dogs. It's more describing the rain that is happening. Imagery is the use of one of the five senses to describe something within a work. The bitter smell of coffee fills the small room in which a person is sitting on a gray, comfortable couch next to what seems like hundreds of plants. The reader can kind of imagine the scene, imagine the room, the smell, and this can be any of the five senses. So an author could add that, the wind is rustling through the trees, or that, a dress feels soft to the touch or something like that. But it just gives the reader an ability to see what is happening within the poem. Alliteration is the repetition of the same letter or sound at the beginning of words that are close to each other within a sentence or line. This is typically used to either make something sound better or to draw emphasis to something. A really good example of this is like tongue twisters. Susie sells seashells down by the seashore. That S sound repeats throughout the line, right? I'm a fan of having fun friends. That's not a tongue twister, but the F is repeating. So in any line or sentence in which a certain like sound repeats, that's alliteration. But the sound has to be at the beginning of the word. Allusion is a reference to something of historical or cultural significance within a text. I could say that man is a real Scrooge. That's referencing A Christmas Carol, a very popular play that has now been turned into many movies. And everyone knows, that I'm saying that he's kind of stingy with his money, right? The author is the next Shakespeare, someone who is very well known. And then that I'm talking about that person's writing ability, even if I don't say the author is really good at writing. This place is like a Criminal Minds episode. I brought this one in so you can know that it can be a modern reference. It doesn't have to be like Shakespeare and Scrooge. But that's kind of saying, that the place is a little creepy perhaps, but it's giving a reference that a lot of people would understand. Rhyme scheme is the pattern of lines that sort of rhyme within a poem. And when you do this, when you label rhyme scheme, you start with A, and if the line rhymes, you give it the same letter, and if it doesn't rhyme, you give it a different letter. For example, the first poem, The Orange Cat Who Was Little Fat Sat on the Mat. Cat, fat, and mat all rhyme, so they're all going to get an A. In the second poem, however, roses are red, violets are blue. Red and blue don't rhyme, so they're going to get two different letters, A and B. I'm awesome also does not rhyme with red or blue, so it gets a C. But and so are you. You rhymes with blue, so it's going to get a B, so that you can see that it's rhyming with the second line. Rhyme is used typically either to help people remember a poem, especially in Shakespeare. Like, rhymes were often used to like help people remember, or in plays like that. But in addition, they're sometimes used just to make a poem sound better. A stanza, a section of lines within a poem. It's like a paragraph. The wind blows and howls, rustling the leaves of the tree and filling the girl with chill. Those three lines are one stanza, and then you see a break before the next stanza. She goes inside to warm up, a glass of tea, a blanket of fire. The warmth fills, and she feels another break, a separate stanza at home. So in the first two examples, it's kind of like different scenes, and so the two scenes are separated. The third stanza, that at home being its own stanza, is really emphasizing that line and sort of calling attention to it for the reader. And so that's another way that stanzas can be used. Repetition is the use of like repeating a word or phrase in order to emphasize it or make the poem sound more smooth and connected. The gray clouds fill the sky. Suddenly the droplets start falling down to earth. Falling is used 3 times, so that's an example of repetition. It sort of makes it sound better. In this case, it actually makes it look better because it makes the droplets look like they're falling down. But then it's also emphasizing that falling action within the poem. Onomatopoeia is a word that sounds like the thing it describes. Woof sounds like a bark. Quack sounds like the sound a duck makes. Crack, that cracking noise, right? Splash, water. Ding, kind of the ding of a bell. And splat. So all of those words, while they describe the sound, they also kind of make the sound. And so that's why it's onomatopoeia. Tone is the emotions and perspectives that an author means to convey within a work of literature. It can be found by looking at word choice. The gloomy castle stands before the mysterious sky. And using both gloomy and mysterious, there's kind of like a negative tone here, something a little moody perhaps. If it said the bright castle stands before the clear sky, that would definitely be a shift in tone just by changing those two adjectives. So in looking at the choices of the author and what they're trying, what adjectives they're using, what words they're using, the reader can kind of get a sense of what emotions the author meant that the reader to have while they were reading. Mood, on the other hand, is what the reader experiences. This has nothing to do with what the author meant, but rather how the reader feels. And it's the atmosphere, overall feeling that the reader experiences. So, after reading text, you might say, this made me feel happy, sad, both. If you think about like a Shakespeare tragedy, after reading a Shakespeare tragedy, you feel really sad. And so the mood of the Shakespeare tragedy would be sad. That is the last literary device here. So thank you all for listening. And please go take that other quiz, and I will see you tomorrow. Thanks.